Hi, today we're going to show you how to do a proper sterile field setup. These setups can be utilized in our clinic exam rooms for procedures. I'm going to start by telling you a couple of things that we need to do before we actually get to the setup. Those things would include getting our products that we're going to need for the procedure, making sure we have the table or a cleared countertop, and making sure we have our cleaning product and unsterile gloves. So the first thing that I'm going to do is wash off. We're going to use a table in this case, a Mayo stand. So I'm going to wash this off because the cleaning product needs an appropriate amount of time in order to dry. We don't want to be waving it or blowing on it because that is going to defeat the purpose of the cleanser. So we're going to wipe this off. And we're going to just set that aside. And then I'm going to move on over to where I would typically wash my hands at this point in time. I'm going to not do that for the sake of time. I'm going to move on next to the products that we have here and a little bit of an explanation while I'm waiting for that table to dry. First thing we're going to look at is the packaging itself for these items. We always need to make sure that the integrity of the packages are secure, and if there is an expiration date on these, making sure that we are not using something that has expired. So these items that we have here are sterile drapes for placing on the field. We also have a sterile fenestrated drape. We have a scissor in a peel pouch packaging, and we'll talk about that momentarily. And we also have 4x4 sponges. So a couple of things about these packages while we're waiting for that to dry is when you are opening these up, making sure that you open them slowly, as the plastic typically will not tear, but there are occasions when the paper part of the package will tear. And if that does happen, you'll need to discard and get a new sterile instrument. So that, and on packages like this or gloves or any of these other prepackaged items, when you open these up, the edges of these packages are considered unsterile. So we want to make sure that when we're opening these items onto our sterile field that we are not sliding these over the edges because that actually constitutes those items becoming unsterile. So we need to maintain that integrity as well. All right, we have allowed enough time for our table to dry. So now we are going to move forward into starting to drape this. I do also want to caution you that once we do get the sterile field set up, you should never put your back toward the sterile field. It should never go beyond your periphery where you can see, because you cannot guarantee that someone or something hasn't touched that, even your jacket, shirt tail, or anything like that. So making sure that your items that you're going to be opening up onto the field and the field are right in a nice close proximity of one another. So we're going to start out with the sterile drape. This is the non-fenestrated sterile drape. This is the point where I am going to utilize this countertop just so that I can show you a little bit easier how to take it off of the paper. Again, this is one of those papers you're going to want to open slowly because it can certainly rip easily. We're going to lay it flat on the table. There is a corner sticking up right here that we're going to grab. Pull it directly off and let it fall free of itself. We're going to just take the corners of this and expand it. We're going to bring it toward us as we cover the table And any portion of the drape that falls below the table is considered unsterile. So all of these corners are considered unsterile. And that's obviously because those are the places that you're going to be touching it when setting up. There. So when you're looking at this table, if you were to take a bird's eye view down on it, you can see somewhat where the edge of that table is. You should not be putting any of your products any further out than 1 inch from the inside of that table. So anything, and I'm going to touch this even though it's sterile. I'm going to do this just for the purpose of showing you that the table is right here and right here. So basically 1 inch within the edge of that table is kind of your off limits point, okay? So now we're going to pretend I didn't touch that and I'm going to start opening some items into the center of this. We're never going to want to reach over the table with our arms or any of the products that we're going to be opening. The purpose for that is because by doing that, reaching over, you can be sloughing skin cells onto the table, sterile table, or these packages may have bacteria or other organisms on them from transit that can certainly drop onto that sterile field as well. So the first one I'm going to open is the 4x4 sponges. Again, we already looked for an expiration date. These are well within the expiration date. The packaging is intact. I'm going to just open it slowly though, otherwise things can pop out easily. These are kind of an easy one in these little plastic because you can actually use your finger to kind of boot it out. So you kind of give it a little toss without crossing that threshold. We're going to move on to the scissors. Now these are a little heavier product, so a lot of times I'll put the lighter things on the bottom, like the sponges, because they will help support these and lessen the chance of puncturing a hole through our sterile drape. Again, that would be one of those situations, if that were to happen, you would have to start all over because then your sterile field is considered unsterile. So, as I said earlier, this is one of those things that we're going to open very slowly as this packaging can tear. I'm going to open it slowly. I'm going to leave that laying right there on that, and then I'm going to flip it onto the table without crossing the threshold here. All right. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, so that is actually setting up a sterile field. One thing is, if you are going to be leaving your room unattended, we want to make sure that something doesn't, dust or something doesn't land on it. I'm going to show you how to cover this table to keep the sterility maintained. I will also show you how to uncover it, because you're going to want to make sure that you're not taking the dirty edges of this top drape and scraping it across your sterile field. Again, just touching the edges, and I'm going to lay this across. I don't want to reach the other direction and bring it back, or again, my arms are going to be over the sterile field. So now we have our areas covered and protected until we need it. Now we're going to be bringing this backwards over this field. The reason for that is, if I were to grab this edge and try and pull it this way, anything that has landed on top of this can literally fall onto our sterile field. So I'm going to be grabbing, making sure not to touch anything with my shirt, just grabbing the very edges again, the same rule as the lower drape, and bringing it back where it's off of the field. So we have a perfectly maintained sterile field that we can use for our procedures.